की तरह है। इन टक्करों में क्या है? एक नई शुरुआत की तरह। आइए हमें एक नई शुरुआत करें, पूरा भरोसा और हिफाजत। देख लेना था, शादी हो रही मामला देख नहीं चाहूंगा।
Hi. Hi, cutie. Hi. All right, I think let me just have a quick look at the time. It is 8:03 and let me just check to see if I can do an active speaker view. All right. Hasipa, can I ask you to just say something to see if you show up?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, perfect. Excellent. Okay. Right. So we are on time. It is now 8:04 in India and 3:34 in the Netherlands.
Right.
So
Not bad.
if it's okay with everyone, should we begin?
Yes. Yes. Sure.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you,
yeah.
Kamakshi.
Thank you. So the speaker is there. We can start. We won't make him
Yeah.
late.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. So thank you everyone who has joined us today for our second Dobara Chat and Chai. The idea for the Chat and Chai essentially is just imagine yourself in a lovely veranda surrounded by awesome people, having hot chai and an enlightening chat. Now, the beauty of it is we can do it on Zoom, so I too from another country can be a part of it, and other people from other cities can be a part of it. So there is a silver lining to our online presence. So the first Dobara Chat and Chai happened last year, and we had our host was Roger Anjansen, and he spoke to us about his topic he chose was demystifying longevity and talking about brain health. And the thing with Dobara is the last year for us was a big one when it came to adapting to an online format, to adapting to the disarray that our world was in. And our main focus was to kind of include and focus on dispelling isolation, loneliness, and keeping depression at bay. And we developed a fantastic program titled the Virtual Wellbeing Program, and that has been going on for 10 months now. And so, you know, we've built up a strong community, and we call it our moai, which is the Japanese concept that goes hand in hand with the ikigai concept. It's a strong social network of supportive, encouraging friends. And that's what we have at Dobara. So now that we have our strong social network, this year for 2021, we decided to focus our spotlight on three main points. One of them is our core, which is well-being and health. That will always be our focus. The second one is lifelong learning, and we have a lot of exciting things coming up. So please stay tuned on that, because for lifelong learning, we have some wonderful partnerships and presentations and activities planned. And now that brings us to our third point, which is a spotlight on caregiving. Now, caregiving, in its the most simplistic term, is providing care for the physical and emotional needs of a family member or a friend at home. That's the simple definition. Now, caregivers are tasked with the important duty of providing support and encouragement for patients as well as for themselves. And when we think of caregivers, we think of people who are compassionate, observant, vigilant, organized, extremely patient, but most of all, resilient. So the whole point of us spotlighting caregiving was to kind of identify the parts that would help caregiving, whether it was respite, recognition, support, active listening, a good laugh at sometimes, prayers, time to recharge. What is it? What are the needs? What goes into helping create a caregiving support network? Then there's several aspects of caregiving that we wanted to also talk about, which involved caregiving fatigue, caregiver burnout, caregiver stress. And the reason why we think we need to bring it to a wider audience and raise awareness about this is, well, this is in the words of Rosalind Carter, there are 4 types of people in this world. There are those who have been caregivers. There are those who currently are caregivers. There are those who will be caregivers. And there are those who will need caregivers. So when you put it into 4 factions that way, we realize that caregiving is a universal concept that affects all of us. So we all need to be involved in helping create systems and policies that make it less difficult, that make it easier. Because it is a constant learning experience, and there's no such thing as one size fits all when it comes to this. Every experience is unique. So with keeping that in mind, our first guest today is Dr. Haseeb Jaffrey. And when we first got to know him and started learning about his experience, we were beyond, mind blown, because it is such a vast time of experience. He's almost, we would say in his experience, he's an expert. He's not somebody who went to school for this. He's not somebody who had a formal education on caregiving. And I think his experience will talk to a lot of other people, because we are all in his shoes in the similar kind of situations. So what we hope is, through talks like this, through conversations like this, we can open up further dialogues, we can come up with new ideas, and we can innovate and find ways to make the path easier for the future of caregiving. So with that in mind, I'm going to now introduce Dr. Haseeb Jaffrey and ask him to tell us a little bit about himself.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sameen, and adab everybody, and very good evening. That was quite an introduction. I don't deserve that much. Yes, but yeah. So that's the thing. So I'm Haseeb Jaffrey, and people popularly call me as Jaffrey, and I work for insurance as a full-time professional with their training and development teams. Apart from that, I'm an avid historian of the city of Hyderabad. I also run a cultural curation company called the Sufi Trails, where we experiment with cities, experiment and explore with cities' history and monuments. So that's what keeps me busy. And Sufism is something which I have been brought up along with, and I have imbibed it through my family, and I continue to enjoy it. So that's about me, I guess. I have 2 lovely children, Aisha and Abdul Rahim, and an absolutely caring and compassionate wife, my Maria Jaffrey. So yeah, this has been a journey for all of us. For me, my mom, my wife, my kids, my sisters, for all of us.
So Hasibai, the title of today's talk is My 17-year-long Journey as a Caregiver. So I think the most apt thing right now is for us to go right back to the very beginning.
Yeah. So I was in 11th standard, and I distinctly remember one afternoon we were expecting. My father used to work for a college, and we expected him to be back from office by around 5:36. But he did came back, but he came back slightly bruised, and he had a fall from his bike, and he had a small accident with an auto fellow, and he had a very severe backache. He was nearing retirement, so we thought that it's okay. It's going to be a backache, and maybe he'll be up in a week or so. But the pain did not subside, and then we went through this whole series of X-rays and stuff like that, and we figured out that he's having a frozen shoulder. It started with a frozen shoulder, and because of the frozen shoulder, they said that the back is also aching because of that. And kind of got physiotherapy, and slowly we started noticing that after that accident, he started developing tremors in his hands. He was having difficulty holding his cup of water, maybe the chai cup which he was holding. It was difficult for holding a spoon as well. And that's when I, for the first time in my 11th standard, heard this word Parkinson's. And I didn't realize what it was. And yeah, that's what the first time I heard the word Parkinson's. And my younger sister, Fatima, was also a healthcare professional, and she started reading all about it, and we started reading it together, and we figured out that apparently there is no treatment for it. And but yeah, you don't give up hope, because he was in very early stages. He was walking. He needed a crutch to walk. He was still going to the job, but 6 months down the line, he was asked to get retired. He took his retirement, and very quickly, by the time I cleared my intermediate and got into my graduation school, he was completely on the bed. And this was as early as 2002, 2003. So yeah, that's when he completely, his back started. He also had multiple lower lumbar problems, and this frozen shoulder and the Parkinson's was taking a toll. And by 2003, he was completely on the bed, and that's when I realized that, oh, guess what? You need to help dad go around washrooms. And that's when first time it hit me that, oh, it's going to take a lot of care. In the starting, it's very easy, because you're young and you're very compassionate, and the love is so high with your parents that you keep on doing it. And that's how the journey all started.
Yeah, I was going to ask at what moment was it that you kind of stepped into that primary caregiver role, and I think you just answered that. So from what I understand, you essentially were going to school and being a caregiver at a very young age. And how was that experience from your point of view?
So, see, I was very young, around 18, 19. I wanted to ride fast bikes. I wanted to go late night movies, chill around with friends. And I was in pharmacy school. So the school itself was very difficult. You're trying to read chemistry and understand nothing out of it, and things like that. But at the same time, the first thing which I kind of held me back was when I realized that I could not hang out late in evenings, because the role of primary caregiver flipped between me, my mom, and my sister. More so with my me and my sister and my mom, and in the day they would manage it, but the expectation was, it was an unsaid rule that the day is theirs and evenings are mine. And what I eventually realized that daddy was addicted to television, and we would sit and watch movies together, and we would have intellectual discussions together, and we ended up watching a lot of television. But eventually I realized that I was actually becoming insomniac because I was sleeping through my classes. And yeah, that's how first started having this feeling of fatigue when I started to sleep in my classes.
Yeah, that's one of the first signs actually of caregiver burnout is when the sleep cycle is non-existent. Yeah. So when it comes to Parkinson's, was there any visible or noticeable cognitive decline that you had to deal with, or was the person that you knew as your father still your father? Just
I feel I was tremendously blessed because till the last day when he breathed his last breath, he was in complete consciousness. And Dr. S.A. Salman is our family physician, and he is an amazing soul. Incredibly indebted to him because he treated all across, and he never let my father slip into a hospital or an ICU for 17 years. And one of the first things, so mental cognition was there. And Salman Bhai's approach, my doctor's approach was only one. Okay, you know what? If he could have his cognitive ability, half your war is done. And by God's grace, he did not slip into Alzheimer's. So he did not have signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. So in that way, I was very blessed. I had physical challenges, but I did not face mental challenges, and I assume that having Alzheimer's and dementia is a much more difficult journey than what I have gone through also. So yeah, in that way, I was kind of blessed because he had cognitive abilities till the last day.
And so now thinking back to that time, like the first 5 or 6 year period, do you remember what resources were made available to you when it came to Parkinson's and the care for Parkinson's, or were there? No, I'll let you answer that.
Oh God, Parkinson's caregiving is alien to India, and so you kind of hear this very nice pep talk when elders visit you and say, "Beta, tum to jannat milengi, tum baba ki khidmat kar rahe hain." Yeah, it's good to hear, but there's a limitation to it. I'm not denying it. That's the only that's the only pat on your back which keeps you going, basically. But in terms of amenities, absolutely not. Even when I went to good hospitals, even when I went to good physiotherapy centers, I would rarely find any professional who knew anything about Parkinson's or how it is to be treated. And I'm sure even now, pretty much, most of the hospital caregivers, like doctors, nurses, many of them are quite alien to how a Parkinson's patient is to be treated. And I remember first few times when we would go out, people would just stare at him as to, hey, look at him, he's all shaking, as if he's some kind of an object to see. And that made him depressed a lot. And he would come back and say, why do you take me out? Because it's so odd, everybody watches me, let's not go out. And for the first couple of years, he was in complete isolation. We would never go out. But eventually, when I started getting hang of it, I started reading more about it, and I think it took me around till I completed my graduation for the next 4 years or 5 years for me to imbibe and say, okay, no, we will have to go out. That's the only way you're going to be up, and that's the only way you're going to enjoy it. And he actually started enjoying it. So I know one turning point was me buying a car. So when I thought of buying a car, many people thought that I wanted to buy a car so that I could drive around. But the purpose of that was to take my father around, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So in terms of accessibility to public spaces, accessibility to washrooms, or or movie theaters or restaurants or things like that, even function halls for that say was is very difficult in India. And in terms of resources, I had absolutely no resources.
Do you think it's getting any better now? Do you think it's easier, or there's more resources, or is that a point that we all need to kind of focus on and say, okay, there's a big hole in terms of knowledge, or accessibility of information, that we need to make more available to people?
I think if somebody wants to learn, Google is an amazing platform to. So information is a plenty. Information is a plenty, but I think every caregiver story is different, and everybody's abilities and disabilities are different, and you need to pick and choose what matches for you. For instance, it took me a lot of practice to change linens. So in starting, I would have had a fixed linen, then and eventually Google led me to figure out that you can change linens with 3 sheets, and by keeping a satin sheet in between, and a plastic wrap in between, and things like that. So and I figured that out. For instance, I had to go and design and own. What do you say? I had to. I remember going to these people who make car seats, and I went in and I took out a frame, and I actually drew the shape of my father's potty, and I designed a potty which had a very soft resin lining, because he was constipated all the time. And when he would sit, he would have injuries on his back, and his skin would peel off. So you will have to improvise. So India is all about jugaad, and I think and that's how I did that. So that's the thing. And I actually went in, and I drew the shape, took the measurement, and made a linen bedded potty seat for him. So yeah, so you will have to figure out things to personalize to your issues.
Yeah, but that's just one of the parts that was really impressive to me was when we talked about this. What I picked up on was how over the years you became more in tuned to um, making your father happy, not just caring for him and making sure that the morning, evening, afternoon was, but more than that, you wanted to give him experiences and create memories even through this difficult time. So you were exceptionally in tune to his wants and needs, and you were able to put yourself in place and kind of go, okay, what if I was him, what would make me happy? And I'm sorry, yeah. And so what I really liked was how creative you got, but also how you did it in a very like streamlined way. Like you said, you explained, if it was to give him an outing at a park, you would go and scope out the park in advance to see how accessible it was, to find out where the bathrooms were located, to find out if they had ramps, what would be the pitfalls, if any. And that in itself is a whole project. And you did it in multiple different ways to give him experiences that he was unable to have. And I would love for you to talk about that, because I think that is something that would be of interest to all of us.
Yeah, so as I told you, the first turning point for me was to buy a small beat up car so that I could take him around. And so initially, my father was very reluctant even to meet relatives. So one of the first things he hated was to meet relatives, because he had cognitive abilities, and he would understand everything. But due to overdose of dopamine, one of the side effects is your tongue becomes swollen. So when he would speak, I was able to understand it, but sometimes it was not legible or cognizable to others. So people would come and say, "Arey Qayyum Saab, kya halat ho gayi aapki?" And he would just hate it. And next 3 days he would be very sad, saying, वो बुड्ढा मेरे को ऐसा कहीं को बोल के गया." So, and so we decided that we would not go to any of our relatives' places, and we decided that we would only visit public spaces. Now, India and public spaces is very difficult, and we started going on drives. Basically, we would pack our lunch boxes together. So I actually gave up finding out washrooms, to be honest. And what I did was I
Seema,
instead, yeah, am
we
I
have a
audible now?
request. Yeah, we have a request from the audience saying that they cannot hear you loud enough.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I eventually gave up on finding out public washrooms. Instead, what I started doing was I started carrying my own wheelchair. So I invested in 3 wheelchairs over a period of time. The first one had no potty attached to it. The second one had a option of adding a potty to it. So I invested in such kind of things. You would invest and learn and experiment with equipment, and so I started doing that. And eventually, after going only to public spaces, and we would time our journey as such that it would not cross 3.5 hours, because that's the time he could sustain outside world. We would have to come back between 3 hours. So those were the plans which we had. So we'd go to common places like Public Garden, Necklace Road, close by locations, and we would just go, and most of the time, and come back very soon. Eventually, we started. Hyderabad goes big on walima dinners and shadis and things like that. Eventually, we started getting a lot of invitations for it, and trust me, Hyderabadi shadis changed the whole game for me, because I took him out for one wedding. He was very sad. Then the second wedding, the sadness reduced a little bit, and by the fourth wedding or fifth wedding, he got used to people watching him. And I said, "Daddy, in लोग देखते बोलते, we'll have to ignore them and just be chill with him." And and usually in Hyderabadi weddings, the same crowd meets you. So people saw him after 5-6 years. So the inquisitiveness obviously diminished over a period of time. And then we started enjoying all the weddings. So next couple of years we enjoyed Hyderabadi weddings like crazy. But the only thing I would do is I was big on reconnaissance. Every place you want to go, I would go a day before. Even if it's a wedding hall, I would go a day before and figure out whether the wheelchair is accessible, not accessible, how far is the parking, is the parking is the parking gate and the dining table to there, how many steps are there, is the pavement lined, is there gravel on it. So I would check the accessibility for it one day in before, and I would avoid any function hall which has 2 floors. So so Hyderabadi weddings was a big thing for us, because that's people started when a lot we started enjoying a lot Hyderabadi wedding. And eventually we also found common people of his interest, and many of his friends started visiting home when they started seeing him in weddings, and he started telling them, "Hey, you guys don't come and meet me," and people started visiting us. So yeah, that also helped me a lot.
So now, listening to you about your recon missions, I think the beauty of this would be to gather up a group of young, fun people and kind of give each one a mission and say, you do the malls and you do this area, and we can have a list of accessible places to make them easily available to those who are looking. right? Because
Absolutely.
not everyone has a 17-year-old son who's like, I have this car, let me take dad out. And I think
You
that put
know,
you in a very unique position to kind of
if
cater.
if I would have an opportunity, I would have created a Craigslist or a Just Dial for the disabled, and I think that that should be done. It's the need of the hour, and it can be done.
Let's
You
do
know,
it.
one instance is there was this new mall in Hyderabad called as the In Orbit Mall, a huge place which had come up. And the first time I went to that mall, I was flabbergasted. You know why? Because this mall was sensitive enough to keep a wheelchair, and I think it was the first mall to have a wheelchair. And I got so excited, I immediately called Maria, my wife, and said, "You know what? This mall has a wheelchair, their own wheelchair. We don't get it." So even that would make me happy. Uh, but I'll tell you the pitfall. The day we visited, it was a day before Diwali, and all the elevators we had to wait for 20 minutes. And people in India are so insensitive that you would have a elevator full of people, and they would see a person on a wheelchair, and they would still not get out because they want to go to the basement first. So yeah, one of the things is sensitivity which people lack towards the disabled, and of course we waited for elevators a lot in malls, but yeah, some of the malls, the newer malls which have come up, are good. They are a good place to take out because most of them have wheelchair accessible washrooms. They are good public spaces. Especially the newer malls are good. They are pretty much equipped to handle wheelchair and accessibility.
So these are all things that you did in a way to kind of keep your dad's depression from sinking in, right?
Yeah.
Uh, what did you do with regards to your own mental health during that time?
Um, yeah, I was slipping into depression. I'll be very honest with it because I would not call it as a depression, but I would miss out smaller things. For instance, I would not be able to give enough time to my cousins. I would not be able to hang around with others. At some point of time, somebody came and told to my mom, कि, you know what? आप आपके बच्चे को पल्लों से बांध रहे हो, वो कुछ सीखेगा नहीं. He will not know how to move the society. That was somebody's comment when I was a teenager, and they fail to understand that I'm not locked because of my mom and locked because of the compassion which I have for my father. So but sentences like these hurt a lot, and it pushed me into a lot of depression. I started eating like crazy. I became obese. I picked up nicotine on the way. I tried a lot of things, and I failed also because I could not smoke and be a caregiver at the same time. तो तो मतलब उर्दू में बोलते हैं ना, कश्मकश थी कि भाई अपन सिगरेट भी नहीं पी सकते और सिगरेट पी के डैडी के सामने इतना करीब नहीं जा सकते. So it was like that. I would not know how to let it out. And as they say, what you can't let go is what you are. So what do you do when you can't let it go? And I started living with it, and it made me a very sorrow and sad person, I would say, for a very long time, for a very very long time, until I found books. I found interesting videos, and I started discovering newer people. Till that time, it made me very sad. I would also like to add that my profession helped me a lot, especially when I started maturing a bit. Uh, I got into uh, I got into the space of learning and development. So I started getting into people development, and people development gave me that access to psychology as to how people make sales and how to improve organizational capabilities, and consistently that community of people whom I met helped me grow out of depression, I would say. No, depression would be a little harsher word, but my lows when I felt it.
Right. So we don't want to use the word depression. So we'll
Yeah.
call fatigue or stress
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But here is another important question. Were you able to find others in similar situations as you, and to have a support system that was not from your mother and sister, but was an external kind of group of understanding and encouragement?
Uh, for a very long time I didn't. But what I made it a point was personal space. Personal space is something which needs to be defined, whether consciously or unconsciously. And over a period of time, I created a personal space of mine. It was not easy. Absolutely not easy. I would have my bouts of fights with my mom. I would have my bouts of fight with my sisters. For instance, sometimes I would come in at 2 o'clock in the night, and I would say, "नहीं आपको संभालना पड़ेगा वो time." Now, when I reflect back, I feel I should have been a little mellow, but I think that was needed at that point of time. So, as a caregiver, you will have to stand up for your space. Sometimes you find options. Sometimes I found neighbors who were very helpful. I found sometimes people, for instance, I had a watchman of mine uh, who was very compassionate towards my father, and I had literally co-hired him, and his responsibility was 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Every day, 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, he would take outside in my apartment, and my father would sit beside the watchman, and that 2 hours was a relief for me and my mom. And you will have to find, because either you hire somebody if you have enough money to do that. But if you don't, you will have to figure out at least smaller spaces. And believe me, if you do not find those smaller spaces, you are going to be rubbed, and and it will take you to fatigue, which will make you sick, and you will fall sick. I feel caregivers are more prone to infections, smaller diseases, everything than all the other normal people, because consistently you come into this. And if you look at the concept of caregivers fatigue also, it was discovered at the time of the Vietnam War, when one of these doctors who was treating Vietnam soldiers, and he continuously kept hearing the soldiers telling their misery again and again, and he started feeling miserable because all he was hearing was this sobbing, sad stories. And in 1992 he came up and coined out this term called as compassion fatigue or caregivers fatigue. And that's the same thing with every caregiver, because you would sit with your person of love, and he would tell his story of success and failure all across, and that's all you hear. And it kind of defines you as a person. And sometimes his failures drives into you, and you will have to say, okay, no, that has been your journey, my journey is going to be very different than yours. And it is in a way different. It has to be different, and only you can make it different. Nobody else can make it different for you.
One of the things that with Dobara we talk about often is that concept that you cannot serve from an empty cup. That you cannot consciously love or care for another person unconditionally without first learning to care and love yourself. And
Absolutely.
I think, yeah, and what we're trying to also put into place is that very important kind of concept of self-care and kind of providing the support that goes into it, because it's in the little things that it counts. It doesn't have to be giant big gestures. It's the small everyday routine things that you do for yourself, that make a difference. And I think, what we can do together, just learning from your story and knowing that there's so many others, especially in our Dobara group, we are many who are caregiving currently or who were caregivers, to kind of create a space to be able to have what you didn't have, that support group, that understanding that every experience is different and unique, but we can all kind of still be there for each other and create our own social network, and find that personal space outside of the bubble that you guys are in.
Yeah, social spaces are absolutely important. So so it's like a bucket, and you keep emptying it every day without refilling it. Caregiving is best explained like it, and eventually your bucket is going to be dry and you will have nothing to give. So what you will have happen is, when you can't give, you will start taking from the person whom you are giving the care, and all he will have to offer you is sadness and sorrow. I might sound cynical with this, but when you serve that long, that cynicism drives into you, and it's very difficult to come. I would say I'm yet to overcome it. It will take a lifetime for me also to overcome it, because these are like deep wounds and scars. It's going to take a lot of healing. I am in that process of healing. I would not call myself as a completely healed person, but yeah, I have taken steps to do that. And one thing is that, create personal boundaries first, period. But don't be so sharp in terms of your tone, your approach, and your language to create that space, that it's evident to everybody. You will have to mellow it down. If especially if you are a primary caregiver, you will have to mellow it down and create it. You will have to create it randomly. For instance, as today, I would say that my neighbors and watchmen was my best companions, because sometimes my watchman would take care of my father for 2 hours or 3 hours, and I would actually go out, watch a movie, and come back. I would not tell it to my mom that I did that. So, but you will do that, and those are the kind of spaces which you will have to create. At the same time, filling up your empty cup is something which is learned the hard way. Uh, Spirituality helps you a lot. Meditation helps you a lot. But these are all far-fetched dreams, because it's very difficult to get into all these things. And although they sound very fancy, and some person will randomly come and say, "Kal se na meditation karo, and kal se you start doing zikr of Allah," and kuch nahi hota hai. So, but yeah, but at some point of time, you will have to find some kind of a placidness in yourself, and that placidness will help you attain a place. And how do you attain that placidness? It could be just by going a walk, just by speaking to a friend, just by reading a book, or cooking something, or maybe ordering something, or do something which you are doing it all alone. You're not sharing with anybody else. That gives you the space to do that. So for me, that something was going to monuments, and that for me, that was something which I started finding in Sufism, and I found spirituality to be very soothing, and it grounded me. So, but I am not an advocate of that. You will have to find whatever gives you that placidness. It could be going out to a pub as well, or it could be uh, go and have a pani puri if it does that. So you will have to find that individually. You'll have to find that.
Yeah, so one of the things that, when one becomes a caregiver, usually you go into it knowing that at some point things are not going to get better.
Yes.
You know that there's going to be a point when it's going to end. How do you prepare yourself for that, and how was your journey on that end part of it?
Uh, that's a very yeah, it's a very difficult question. Uh, so I was very young when I started doing that, and uh, as a 20 something pharmacist in India with very few job opportunities, one of the things was looking up to my future as to what would I do? And when I grow up, will I get a job? Will that job be in Hyderabad? Which profession? Which company? How would I earn? That was the first question, because I was living out of my father's pension. So financial crisis is something which everybody has to deal with, and you can't think anything about your future uh, without having that tag of that caregiving which is with you, and you will have to make the best of opportunities whatever they come to you, and I just did that with the flow. So every time I would be presented an opportunity, I would gallop at it. And the only thing in consideration was, will it give me an opportunity to parallelly serve my father? uh, and uh, and that's something I it got imbibed into me. So uh, I have friends who have grown leaps and bounds, and people have gone to foreign shores. I had a class of 44 people, and 40 of them are in US and across the globe. There are 4 people who are back in India, and I'm one of them. It kind of made me sad, and I felt fatigued because of that. But eventually, it seeped into me that if I'm going to be in India, so it be. If I can't get opportunities in life and in profession, so it be. As long as I'm able to be a caregiver. And to do that, you need to have a very compassionate heart. It's not that I'm bragging about myself, but that's how it is, and that's the only way you accept it. Uh, I'm the only son, so I don't have an elder brother to say, "Bhaiya, ab tum aa jao, main 4 saal kar liya, ab tum karo." So I did not have a loop to escape as well. Uh, so I grew up with it. I literally grew up with it, and continued doing it. And at the same time, I also started enjoying it. So as a caregiver, you will have to bring in that element. If you're going to crib, you're always going to crib, and you will come to an end without doing anything. uh, and you never know, my journey lasted 17, tomorrow you might find somebody whose journey lasted 52 years also. So you will have to start enjoying your journey. So I started enjoying my father's company, and we went along great, and we would often have jokes. We would often have watched a lot of Sufism and listened to a lot of sermons, and had a lot of fun together, hanging around with each other. In fact, the first thing he would ask me is कि क्या करा तू दिन भर आज किसको बोर करा, आज किसको पढ़ाया, how did the day go, and we would discuss politics, and he was a big time foodie. In fact, he would have we would order 3 newspapers, and at morning 7:30, 8 o'clock, all of them were exhausted. He would finish them so quickly. Uh, One sad thing was, he always wanted to learn how to use mobile phone and the laptop, but unfortunately, he had clutched his fingers, so his fingers were like this, and he would not even he was able to open his index finger so that he could use, but he tried it with his thumb, I must say. It was very sad for him that he was not able to use Facebook or something, but he knew all these things existed. And he would say, "Kya dekh raha Facebook pe? Kya hai? How does it work?" And he was very inquisitive. By the way, he worked for the defense, so he was technologically in place. So every day he would read all these newspapers, and he would say, "You know what? KFC has this Wednesday bucket thing. Why don't you order a bucket?" And he would say, "Thursday Pizza Hut is opening 1+1 offer. Let's go there." And I was also scared कि इतना बाहर का खाना खाएंगे, you are already turning obese. The only good thing was he did not have diabetes, and he took full advantage of it. So we would often go out. There was hardly any restaurant which we did not go. If we would not go, we would sit in the car and eat it. So that's how it happened with us.
My mom in in the chat has written something, and it's quite poetic. She says, "Tell them about the times you helped your dad sit in the grass, feel the dew on his feet."
Absolutely. So, yeah. So, one of the first times I bought this beat up car, and we went to the most traditional place of Hyderabad called as Gandipet. So, we went to Gandipet, and we found a nice shaded area, nice tree, a nice old banyan tree, and we parked our car across it. And me and my wife, like all old Hyderabadis, we call ourselves as the Shatranji people. So we pulled out that old mattress or carpet. We rolled it out, opened our tiffin boxes, and for and we sat down to eat. And I got the collapsible wheelchair, and I made him sit on the wheelchair. And he said, "You know what? I want to sit down." And then I said, "Why not?" So he said, "But I don't want to sit on this mat. I want to sit on the grass." So I removed the mat and let him sit on the in the grass, and that's when I realized that after so many years he was actually feeding the soil and the sand. And he said, "I just want to lie down here," and I let him lie down, and he felt so happy. And my mom was cribbing all across, saying, "Ki, Arey, you know what? We do not have a spare pajama with you. The grass is wet. It's going to soil your clothes. Then it's going to soil the carpet linen and it's going to soil the car's seat cover and things like that." But I let him have this fun. And after that, that became a ritual that whenever we would go out, he would say, "Aaj mere ko niche baithna hai," and I would actually make him sit down. And yeah, I think that's one of the most beautiful things which we enjoyed doing. And we would sit down and have our shikampur and rotis which we would carry with us.
That is, see, that's a beautiful story, and I think that's a beautiful way to kind of bring this all together and to an end. Hasibai, before you go, would you have anything that you would like to say to caregivers now? Um,
So my only invitation to caregivers is to uh, do your research. uh, uh, there's plenty of open source. You will never find a guru, or you will never find a doctor or a pharmacist or a physiotherapist or a caregiver who is going to tell you what to do. Everybody is unique. Every disease is unique. I have not handled dementia. Somebody handling dementia, please do your research on dementia. And before you do anything to your caregiver, you are the most important person. So first take care of yourself. So I had fallen into bad trips of eating bad, not exercising and things like that. But my invitation to all of them is to hold your ground. Only if you are helpful to yourself, you can be of use to anybody else. So please be helpful to yourself, and please be kind to yourself. One of the biggest thing is not having kindness to your own self. And even now, sometimes my mind drifts away into thinking, "Okay, could have I done it a little more better." I would sometimes remember of a bout of fight and something I would go, "I shouldn't have told him that day." It still happens to me even now. And then eventually I'm learning that I'll have to be kind to myself. So until and unless आप अपने आप को माफ नहीं कर सकते हैं, nobody is going to forgive you. So be kind to yourself, do your research, improvise. There's a lot of YouTube has been a blessing. Go and Google out whatever issues you have. And one thing which I lacked in my journey was a group of people who could do that. Maybe a support group. I would often read on blogs that in more developed countries you would actually have a support system. Like in UK, you would have NHS, and they would actually have a Saturday sessions for caregivers, and you would have roundtable conferences or speak out sessions. I think Dobara as an organization, if we could create a platform where caregivers could share their challenges and journeys, uh, we could be helpful. For instance, when I was sharing the poster for this particular talk, a very young a yoga instructor messaged me and say, you know what, I do yoga programs for Parkinson's patients. And I said, ma'am, I'm sorry, I lost my father in 2017, but if you would have met me 5 years back, it would have been a blessing for me. So I ran through all these yoga sessions, everything, physiotherapy, yoga, breathing exercises, anybody and everybody who advises you to do so, you would take in. Oh, and another very important thing, you'll have to be deaf to a lot of advice. You will have to be deaf to a lot of advice, because anybody and everybody would come up to you and give their own piece of advice. And it's not that they are doing it for the sake of doing it. They are also very compassionate people. They are sharing their compassion. But you know what? You'll have to be very picky whose advice you take. I have had very bad consequences of taking some unsolicited advice just because that person was elder to me. And after a couple of years, I would say, "Oh, it's an amazing advice." I would smile and do whatever I had to, and don't get into an argument with them. Also, they are also giving it from a very safe space. But only you are the best judge to tell what is right and what is wrong. Yeah.
Right. So, on that note, for everyone who is listening to us and joining us here on Zoom and on Facebook Live and elsewhere, with Hasibai, we came up with this idea of, if there are people who are interested, of meeting once a month on Zoom and having a closed group, confidential group, caregivers meeting. Where everyone, just like how Hasibai shared his story, can share theirs, whatever they want to share, really, it's up to you. And kind of have an exchange going, a dialogue started. And I think that would be something that would be interesting. So we're going to launch that. If you are interested in being a part of that, please email me at team@dobara.org, and then we will send you the invite for the first Zoom, and then we'll take it from there. I think we can build a community of support and give everyone all that that has been missing in terms of a support system. So I think this is a good place to start. What a story, Hasibai. I think you have done a wonderful job. Thank you for talking about it. I know it might seem weird for you to be like giving the intricacies, but it helps. It helps because the more voice, the words we put into it, it starts off more conversations elsewhere. It's a ripple down effect that we're hoping for. So thank you for opening up your heart and explaining the whole process to us, and for taking the time. So thank you so much.
All my gratitude. I'm also very excited to see somebody on the chat. As I told you, my neighbors were a big strength. One of my neighbor from UK has joined, Sakina Auntie, and she was a yoga instructor and a physio herself, and she would often come and give my father yoga sessions. So you will have to find people like her. I was blessed to have a lot of people who helped me out in this journey, and I'm sure everybody will find that. You will have to be on a constant vigil to find people, and be unapologetic and respectful to ask their help as well, because it takes a lot of guts to ask also. Okay, can you do that for me, without any exchange of anything from me other than a thank you? And many people would actually give you that. Thank you so much. Gratitude to Dobara, Mateen Auntie, and Sameen for starting this exciting journey. And definitely, I am looking at starting a help group with caregivers. and there are a lot of people who would love to join, and we can figure out some kind of help to each other. And if not a help, even a listening ear is all what sometimes we need. This is the first time in my life I have actually spoken about my father at length, for almost 1 hour to you. So, from a personal safe, it was actually testing my safety also. Okay? How much can you tell it in a public place? But yeah, I think as long as we bring out these topics, the stigma will fall, and it will be more easier for people to breathe, especially caregivers, because whoever would come to your ask would ask, "How's your daddy? How's your mummy?" But nobody would ask you, "Beta, tum kaise hai? तुम्हारी तबीयत कैसी है? How's it going? How's your job going? How's तुम्हारा हाल क्या है?" तो आपका हाल बेहाल है, लेकिन आप दूसरों का हाल सुधारने लगे हो। अपना हाल सुधारना
Assalamu
बहुत
alaikum, Hasib. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm so happy and delighted to see you talking about uncle, and I was so delighted